We here at the Sports History Network proudly partner with 26 podcasts, all revolving around the history of sports. But did you know that many of our hosts were sports history authors way before they started their shows? It's true. We've got Joe Ziemba, host of When Football Was Football, Joe Zagurski, host of Pro Football in the 1970s, Mark Morthier, host of Yesterday's Sports, Tommy Phillips, host of Lombardi Memories, and Scott Adamson, co-host of From the 55-Yard Line. All these authors have many books for you to choose from. To check them out, go to our website at sportshistorynetwork.com/sportshistorybooks. Pick up your copy today. Soundtrack provided by Kevin MacLeod of filmmusic.io.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Welcome to Game Film, the sports movie review podcast, with your hosts, Oz Davis and Aron Harris.
Edward Seacott, Joseph Jefferson Jackson, Arnold Gandil, Charles Risberg, Oscar Felch, Claude Williams, and George Weaver are hereby accused of conspiracy to commit a confidence game.
We're gonna see the Sox!
Baseball, 1919. There were no free agents, no million-dollar salaries, but there was a team no one could beat. The true story of the team they called the Black Sox, and the scandal that broke the heart of the nation.
Any bet against my Sox this series is a sucker bet.
You can find 7 men on the best club willing to throw the World Series?
Come on, Joe!
You sure as Joe ain't in. I ain't. You want me?
You don't want to be stupid, do you, Joe?
Now, you just sign your name right there, Joe.
I made an agreement with those guys.
A couple of Boy Scouts here, they made a deal. The players are in now. What are they gonna do, call a cop?
What you get it off for, Eddie?
Eddie can dump 3 games all on his own.
We don't get Eddie, we forget about it.
How many games does Mr. Seacott win for us this year?
29, sir.
You said if I won 30 games, there'd be a $10,000 bonus.
29 is not 30, Eddie.
I want to make the play. I don't feel right.
You can't welch on these guys.
Get out! I know what you're doing!
After you've gone and left me crying.
They were an American dream come true, the best that ever were. 9 men took the field, but when the game was over, there were 8 men out.
What do you think of these players of yours now, Mr. Gleason?
I think they're the greatest ball club I ever seen, period.
Don't you forget it.
8 Men Out, written for the screen and directed by John Sayles.
Right, that's the trailer, or at least the audio part of it, for 8 Men Out, a 1995 film directed by John Sayles, which, per the IMDb synopsis, is about, quote, the Chicago White Sox, who are set to play the Cincinnati Reds in the World Series of 1919, are at odds with the team owner Charles Comiskey, played by Clifton James, who pays his players unsatisfactory wages despite the team's popularity. A group of professional gamblers offers the Sox's best athletes a fortune to throw the series, and the players agree. However, their reputations and careers are ruined when the dark secret dubbed the Black Sox scandal reaches the public consciousness, unquote. I would also add the film features an ensemble cast of actors. Gotta say, it's mostly a boys' club, fair warning there, but nevertheless, fantastic performances. Some of my favorites were John Sayles himself, who plays sports writer Ring Lardner. John Cusack is Buck Weaver. John Mahoney is manager Kid Gleason. David Stratham is Eddie Cicotti. Christopher Lloyd as the gambler Bill Burns. And Michael Lerner in a tiny but badass role as the big money gambler Arnold Rothstein. Now, as I understand it, my co-host Aron hadn't seen 8 Men Out before viewing it for this podcast. So I have to ask, what's your take?
So usually movies that take place in the jazz era, like, or Prohibition, I've never have really had an interest in pursuing. For some reason, it's not a part of American history that I've developed an interest in, at least not to this point in life. And so I typically stay away from those movies as well, because I've often found that period pieces either are severely under budget and it kind of ruins the whole atmosphere of the movie. You can't really immerse yourself in it unless you were to shoot really concise interior shots, or it's just way overdone by the actors. Sometimes they get too carried away with trying to put themselves in that time period to the point where they feel like caricatures of people from that time. They call every woman a dame and stuff like that, and it just doesn't really feel like it's anything I would expect to see if I were to time travel back there. But this was really a movie that I think got it right. I didn't feel like anyone was acting as if they were trying to recreate the psychological state of a person back then. They were just acting, and it felt natural and unstaged. And it really kind of added to the overall enjoyment of the movie for me, because even from like the opening credits, when they had the movie and the 1919 title card come up, I kind of felt like this was a movie that I could really get into and that I ultimately did enjoy. I mean, as someone who is not really a baseball fan, I really came into the movie not really knowing what to expect, but at the end of it, I was really glad that I watched it, and it really felt like a seamless viewing because it was enjoyable due to the fact that they had good costumes, good setting. I got into the era that I'm not normally interested in, and it was just fun from the actors. Like you said, it's an ensemble cast, it's a boys club. It was fun just kind of seeing everybody interact with each other and everything. Everybody had good chemistry.
I'm glad you brought that up this early on in the run of game film, because this is one of my grand unifying theories of film review. Let's talk about the period piece. It's one of my theories that one of the best ways to avoid that horrid label, which we don't want in the 21st century, dated, I think, is to just make a period piece. Just make a period piece, right? A perfect example of this is The Sting, 1976, right? But since it's set in the 20s, and again, you have Newman and Redford at the peak of their powers, both of them, right? So that helps quite a bit. And you have a really slick plot, nice direction on it as well. And it's always in the 20s, like this film too. What you're talking about with the actors, I think, is made a lot easier, right? What does an actor really want to do? How can you tell the good Shakespearean actor, right? Because they know what they're saying. If you try and force an actor to use cheesy slang from 100 years ago now, well, at least the setting is 100 years ago, of course it's going to sound stilted, because it is stilted, right? You want the actual, live flowing dialogue, snappy dialogue. One of the great things I think about this film is the script. We always talk in script writing about economy of dialogue. And this film is working with a cast of 40, 50, 60 major characters, some of which appear in 2 scenes. Right? Right towards the end, we get the climactic appearance of who is ultimately, historically, the most important figure in this film, Commissioner Landis, right? He's in the movie for 2 scenes, the second of which fades into a voiceover. Okay, but how much do you know about that guy based on the dialogue he puts forth in those 2 scenes? A ton.
Right.
It's like this movie wastes no time, yet it's 2 hours long, right?
From what I read, it's an hour and 59 minutes and 46 seconds. And Sayles was under contract to make the movie under the duration under 2 hours. So he fulfilled that mission. Right. That direction, I should say.
The DVD, the 20th anniversary DVD of this thing has gotten a lot, as well as the Blu-ray, have gotten a lot of kudos for the extras on. So I'm certain there's some cut scenes on the floor here. Because, okay, for example, a great character too. Here's another great character. He's in it for 2 or 3 scenes. Eddie Collins, right? The Hall of Famer, right? I guess like the only player on that team that would eventually make the Hall of Fame because of this scandal. And he comes off as this total cocky son of a bitch, but what a great character. Economically presented, tight, but we never get to see him play ball. So it's like, that seed is on the floor somewhere. I mean, he's got to have made a play, at least in passing in the game. They do a nice job recreating some of the baseball. Oh, and did you notice this, by the way? Speaking of recreating the baseball, no home runs.
Was there no home runs?
I don't think so. Did the White Sox get a home run? Wait, I may have to.
I think in game 3, because there is one time I think where Buck Weaver decides he's not. I don't remember if it was Buck, but there was a character that just decided just to slam it, and I think they got a home run.
Yeah, that might have been Hatfield, Charlie Sheen. I think you're correct. Yeah, damn it. Well, but pretty close. Close. And that was the thing that I like, is that you say you usually don't get into period pieces. A lot of people out there don't get into baseball.
From that era, I don't really get
right,
into
okay, so yeah, 20s stuff. No Great Gatsby for you, old sport. I know a lot of people don't like baseball movies per se, but I think that in the end, this is a great movie. I don't think you have to look, there's something for everyone, right? There's the proverbial something for everyone, except, there's no love story, but you can't have it. I mean, you get the courtroom drama, right? You get some good sports stuff. You get a lot of witty dialogue. You get some nice performances, like I've said before, some nice exchanges of dialogue. It's just a good movie.
Well, that's kind of a point I want to go a little deeper in, because something that I really took away from this was the tone of the movie. And this kind of accompanies the witty dialogue, or the witty dialogue in the performances. This could have easily been a very melodramatic movie about about the integrity of baseball, and how could role models do this to the kids. But it really wasn't that at all. I wouldn't say it was a carefree tone, but it didn't take itself too seriously. It was something that didn't try to send a message, but rather just kind of showed you what happened in a very entertaining way. I haven't read the book that the movie was based off of, and I never really have gone too deep into the story of the Black Sox scandal. I mean, I knew Rothstein and his involvement, but I never really figured out what the whole motive was, and Kaminsky's motive in it, or not his motive, but sort of like his reason for giving players no money, which in turn made them want to get in on the fix. But I didn't feel like it was trying to give me any grand message. Even when we got to the courtroom, you have like that one scene where the kid says, "Say it ain't so, Joe." But even then, it was one scene that I can understand why you put in there, because you have these ball players that are talking to the kids early on, but it doesn't detract from the overall movie.
That's the myth. That's a myth about that.
Yeah, that's a cinematic insertion just for dramatic effect.
Right. I mean, I've heard different spins on that, but it becomes. I mean, this is what happened
on the kid.
Yeah. The "say it ain't so" bit. I've heard one where Joe turns and says, "I'm afraid it is, son." Okay. There's others where Joe doesn't even hear him. It's just like, he says it twice. Really? That's a movie convention. But, you keep it, right? Because what happens in sports, especially as we'll see in our next film that we're going to talk about, these stories become legends, especially since newspaper writers were given pretty serious free rein. I mean, you do enough historical stuff, you look at enough old newspapers, and some of these guys are liberally using the fiction, let's say.
Most of it reads like fiction.
Yeah. And to be fair, there's a lot of good reporters. I mean, we have some good reporters in this movie, right? We have guys who do like real reporting and real writing too. Ring Lardner was a accomplished songwriter as well, for example. And I believe he played some sports. He's played by Sayles in this movie, a very tall guy. But I love the writers in this movie too. But of course, I'm biased in this respect. Okay, I just wanted to ask you one more thing. Favorite quote, favorite line in the movie?
At the very end, when Buck Weaver is at the minor league, he's at the minor league baseball game where Shoeless Joe is at. And I think he had I don't remember if this was the exact quote, but whenever he said he was the best.
It's easy to change. It's him. Who's him?
It's Joe Jackson. What? Get out of here.
Who's Joe Jackson?
Look at how he's hitting us. He's killing us out there. Double, 2 home runs.
These bushers make peanuts, Les. Jackson made a fortune on those games.
It's him.
You ever see him play?
Yeah, I saw pictures.
Pictures.
I saw him play.
Yeah? What do you think?
He was the best. Run, hit, throw. He was the best.
So what do you think? Is that him?
Nah. Those fellas are all gone now.
Eight Men Out, available on HBO Max. We'll be right back. I'm going to do a couple of commercials, then we're going to talk a couple more movies. I'll get you back to the Game Film Podcast in just a minute. But first, I'd like to take a minute to tell you about quite possibly the greatest website of all time, newspapers.com. If you're listening to this podcast, or any of them at the Sports History Network, you're probably into sports history. And you probably also know that for learning about anything prior to, say, 1990 online, the typical search engines like are nearly completely useless. But then there's newspapers.com. Newspapers.com gives you access to over 640 million pages worth of news from North America, Britain, Ireland, and more, dating from 1798 to last week. Do up a search for Super Bowl I, the 36th Berlin Olympics, Wayne Gretzky's first game, whatever. Newspapers.com takes you there with historical flavor that search engines like just don't give you. And now, get a free 1-week subscription to newspapers.com by visiting sportshistorynetwork.com/newspapers. With a paid subscription, you'll also be helping to support the production of this podcast and other Sports History Network shows. That's sportshistorynetwork.com/newspapers. Newspapers.com. Way better for searches than you know what I'm talking about.
This is the story about the early days of baseball. It is the story of what it was like and how it felt to be a baseball player at the turn of the century and in the decades shortly thereafter. This is also the story of America at the turn of the century and prior to World War I, a time of cobblestone streets and horse-drawn trolleys. It is the story of young man's hopes, his struggles, his triumphs, and his failures in what history has recorded as the quiet time. It is about the time when the fate of young men was seen as their own doing, and hard work was viewed as the pathway to success. It is about the time in baseball when Ty Cobb would win 12 batting championships in 13 years and had a .371 average in the one year he didn't win. It is about the time when home run champions could win the title with 6 or 10 or 19. It is about the time of John McGraw, Iron Man McGinty, and Christy Mathewson. The time of Walter Johnson, of Rube Marquardt, Tommy Leach, and Honus Wagner. All these were honored in their generation and were the glory of their times.
Yeah, so this choice for me was a little more of an aesthetic pairing. This is obviously a documentary that was also based off a book. It's pretty short. It's only about 50 minutes, but I think after watching 8 Men Out, I really wanted to see more of the era in which it took place. And the glory of their times doesn't deal specifically with 1919, but talks about baseball from the turn of the century going till 1918. And I really wanted to see sort of the pictures and the actual footage of what it was like in that time, and sort of what it was like to see players who were giants of their times, you could say, but who were also just common people. I found it interesting to see a lot of the players, but also contrast the differences of how guys would be pitching 2 games straight without a break, and hearing a lot of baseball players tell their story from the ground up during that time. And it really kind of gave me a good visual compliment to what I saw in 8 Men Out, to see sort of like the real voices and the real stories that kind of went into that era.
So the book is 66. It's published in 66. And Did you catch when this documentary was released,
19,
I should say?
1970.
Right. It's clear that they took the recordings, which was a snappy way for journalists to do, interviews back then. You bring a big old tape recorder and it's clear that it's recordings from that. It's also interesting that they have players who are they're not the studs, okay? They're not the heroes that you're talking about, the Walter Johnsons, the Ty Cobbs. We're talking about Rube Marquardt, Wahoo Crawford, Sad Sam Jones, and Fred Snodgrass, guys like this. So kind of like your second tier players. I mean, I know them since I was a kid. I've played baseball sims. So I know who these guys are, but I'm sure most don't. In fact, that was one of the things I wanted to say about this film, is that this is why a documentary like this is so important. I was on Facebook the other day and I was looking at a group that was kind of about retro comic books. And there was a posting where there was this panel and, Superboy, Clark Kent Superboy was being all angsted out. And he wants to play ball with the kids, but he can't risk giving away his powers. And he's just thinking, he's got the little thought bubble. And he's thinking, if I could show them what I could do, I could be Ty Cobb, Babe Ruth, and Walter Johnson all rolled into one, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. And everybody in the comments was going, oh, yeah, Walter Johnson. Who the fuck is Walter Johnson? And it's just like, right. Whoa. All my life I've taken for granted that this guy was a household word. Now, okay, I'm not unrealistic enough to think that's still the case, but geez, I honestly thought he was still on like a Ty Cobb level. I mean, I know Tris Speaker, who gets a lot of play in this movie, who was awesome, who was Salieri to Ty Cobb's Mozart, basically, by the way. So I'm glad he gets a lot of coverage in this film, but people forget. I mean, Walter Johnson is number 2 all time in wins. He's one of 2 guys ever to get 400 wins. Until we count Satchel Paige's barnstorming stuff, he's the only player out there that's got 400 wins besides friggin' Cy Young. And I believe they named a trophy after him or something. So it's like, these films are important to remember these guys. Also, on top of this, I mean, this was the thing for me. I mean, I've been studying baseball history. I mean, Walter Johnson's one of the original 5 in the Hall of Fame. Right, stuff like that. Fascinated with the stories of Lou Gehrig, and even to some extent Josh Gibson and Satch and those guys. I liked all of the specifics in this as well. So for somebody like me, I mean, of course I know all about Honus Wagner. Of course I know, Christy Matthews. But I like the specifics in this one. I like the 1905 Giants A's series. I like the 1909 Pirates Tigers series.
As I was watching this, a lot of these guys really, I'm not sure how old a lot of these guys were when by the time this was filmed. Obviously, they were in like the much later stages of their life.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. That's why he had to get these guys. These were the guys that were still around.
The great thing about like this time era, though, like this to me seems like it was the perfect time to get into baseball because it kind of has that element of you had to see it to believe it. All these stories to me were obviously we don't have footage, but that kind of adds to like the mythology of gamesmanship, the mythology, I guess, of baseball specifically, because the documentary also kind of shares the rise of America along with the rise of baseball from 1900 to 1919. And it was really enjoyable to see sort of like that time before we had a lot of footage. I mean, they have some still photographs, obviously, but listening to these guys talk just kind of reminded me of like listening to my uncle or my grandfather talk about a time in which I have no proof that it actually happened, but it sounds amazing.
My dad is not so old as that, right? So thank God for YouTube, where we can find, clips of Sandy Koufax, Bob Gibson, Ted Williams. Yeah. We can see those guys. But yeah, they talk about that a couple of times where it was like, this is the only film of Christy Mathewson. And I don't think they had any film of Walter Johnson. And then they had a little bit of Ty Cobb. running, feeling second. But again, this is what happens in sports history.
October 25th, 1986 is the biggest day of playwright Nicky Rogan's life.
I have never worked on a show where the leading man has a parasite in his brain.
This is all your history. That parasite is eating it.
Not because a critic wants to destroy his play.
He'll write a review so devastating it will shatter your career.
Not because his marriage is ending.
How could you do that?
Well, I'm a man. She's, a woman.
She's my gynecologist. I've been talking to a prominent divorce lawyer.
How prominent?
He has his own submarine.
But because tonight, his beloved Boston Red Sox are one game away.
This could be it.
From winning the World Series.
If you know anything about the team's history, it's a tragedy in the making. I've been carrying this franchise on my back since I'm 6 years old.
I've never understood your thing with the Red Sox.
They're getting ready to kill my play. That's about us, who we are.
The truth is never gentle.
Yeah, you can analyze a Red Sox game day and night for a month and still uncover complex layers of feelings. Feelings you didn't even know you're capable of having. That kind of pain has a memory all of its own.
And a drive to left. Going back on it is Mookie Wilson, and this one is...
Yes! The Red Sox are winning.
Red Sox are always winning. Till they lose.
Each of us lives in the thinnest possible wrapping of dreams. And truth is the force that penetrates this wispy skin.
You want to make the night come down. It's too hard for you to believe in something.
But I want to believe.
If you believed, you wouldn't be walking around with a handgun in your belt.
There are things that speak to us from the past. Your truth is locked up in the past.
Losing is easy.
Winning is easy. Losing is complicated. Intensely personal. All the mistakes I've made, all the fear, encased in this little envelope we call the body.
Lost games, lost dreams. There's the thing that always happens because it has
to. Game 6.
I could have been happy. Could have been a Yankees fan.
That was the trailer for Game 6, and if you never knew this film existed, I'm not surprised. You'd think that with co-stars of Batman and Iron Man that this film would get a revival of sorts, but not so much. In fact, Aron, okay, I was ready to say that this is available on Vudu, but it's not, right?
Not until August 10th.
I don't know who could possibly have the rights to this film. This is a very obscure 2005 film. Let's see. I would say, okay, the best way to describe Game 6, I did not go to any official synopsis for this, but basically, without giving away too many spoilers, but I honestly cannot believe how similar this film is in a lot of ways to Birdman,
okay,
the 2016 film. If you take out the superhero elements and substitute Red Sox fandom, you more or less have the same movie. It's about a guy who's got a lot at stake with his play, whose leading man has certain psychological issues. You've got actor problems. In this movie, it's the great Baby Newworth. You've got an attractive daughter, and you've got a critic, in this case played by Robert Downey Jr., who might kill this poor dude's play on opening night. This is an independent film which premiered at the Sundance Film Festival, but somehow could not pick up a major backer in North America or even England. Well, I guess that's not too surprising since the baseball is such a thematic part of the film. I'm sorry I can't ask what you thought of this, but on the other hand, at least then I can recommend this film. You will not be disappointed.
Why did you choose this as a pairing with 8 Men Out?
Okay, because baseball. When we decided to put together Game Film, we decided that a good format would be to have a classic or a notable film, let's say at the top, and then we'd each pick a film that would sort of spin off of this. One of the problems with baseball movies is that there are lots of great baseball movies, but there are about 9 or 10 maximum that everybody's going to think of first. And I wanted to do something completely outside the realm. Okay. Mm-hmm. This is one of those movies where I guess this doesn't happen quite so well. I guess it does happen nowadays, but more online. This is one of these movies where you find it you're one of the only people in the world that's seen it, and you preach, go see this film. This podcast right now is just an excuse for me to pimp this film, which nobody has seen, and is a really great film.
Well, yeah, I haven't seen it, but one of the things that look interesting to me is that it was written by Don DeLillo, and I've read a little DeLillo, and I've kind of wondered what it would be like if he wrote a script. So here, the way you describe it, like Birdman, and from what I understand, he is a big baseball fan too. I'm not sure how deep his fandom goes, but it's been the subject in a few of his books. So I'm interested to see like how he would write it for the screen, especially coming from the vantage point of a playwright who is writing about Game 6 of the World Series in 1986, or is it just,
not at all.
Or is
not
it just
at
like
all.
in the drop back of it?
Yeah. See, the angst of it is that he's a Red Sox fan in New York, right? Of course, he's on Broadway, right? So, so that's the thing of it. See, in a lot of ways, this reminded me of, and I can even make another recommendation based on this one. It reminded me of Fever Pitch, not the American version, which ironically is also about the Red Sox, but rather the British version, because ostensibly it's a movie about sports. But what it's really about is about sports fandom. It's about what it means to be a fan. Because really, if you think about it, it's really kind of, I mean, like so many things that we do as humans, it really makes no sense. Why are you loyal to a team, especially these days? Why do you emotionally invest to the point where when they lose Game 7 on that last second shot, it hurts? Right. Why? Why does it feel like you got so close? It makes no sense. And films like this one and films like Fever Pitch do that. They explore that concept. And that's what appeals to me, too, about this film, about Fever Pitch. Yes, I admit it's not very much related to the glory of our times, baseball in the first 20 years of the 20th century, or the Black Sox. But great film, great baseball film. Something completely different.
Well, that's good. I mean, well, that's what's good about like this segment of the show, where you can tell people about a movie and they can kind of create their own identification with the feature film.
Here's the hope.
Well, I mean, like, I don't know how many people would associate any storyline with the Black Sox from the glory of their times, but maybe they could be like a visual component that gives them like that same immersion that I felt.
I'd actually go glory of our times first, and then go into the Black Sox, because very, very conspicuously, in fact, I laughed at one or two parts. Very conspicuously, guess what? They avoided.
Yeah, they stopped
the
right.
Black Sox.
They stop right when they get to after 1918.
Oh yeah, but that's not it. See, Eddie Cicotti was a Hall of Famer. He is Hall of Fame level. I mean, he's winning 30 games with no arm in this. Oh, I'm sorry, no, 29.
Yeah.
But we'll count the one he won in the series too. So 30. Yeah. He won 30 games and he was shot for some crazy, at that time it's even crazier, and he's still winning this many games. He's a badass. Okay. He easily could have made this. And do you remember the bit where they're talking about Ty Cobb, how he hit over 374 for like 9 straight years, and then one year he hit 380 and he didn't win the batting title? You remember that part?
Yeah.
Guess who won the freaking batting title that year? Guess. Joe Jackson. Joe Jackson, man. That was the thing, that was the other thing, is that, Tris Speaker was up there. But the other guy that was always up there in the average race, because people really cared about it in those days when there were so few home runs, right? In the average race, Shoeless Joe was always in the top 3 with those guys in the American League. Okay, so like Aron said, Game 6, a 2005 release, will be available on Vudu beginning on August 10th. That's right.
Yeah.
And
Vudu says anticipated August 10th, so don't hold my feet to the fire if it's not there.
They're probably trying to get the rights from the Polish distributor for the US. Because he knows he's got a movie with Batman and Iron Man in it, right? So
yeah, they're trying to get the translators.
Yeah. In any case, I should also point out that In the Glory of Their Times is available for free on YouTube. And so for my co-host, Aron Harris, I'm Oz Davis, and we'll see you next time on Game Film.
Take it easy.
At the Sports History Network, we're all about sports yesteryear, and so we're so pleased to introduce you to Row One, an online memorabilia gallery and shop that brings your sports history to life anywhere. The Row One gallery includes over 5,200 gorgeously reproduced prints of team posters, game program covers, game tickets, advertisements, and more in baseball, pro and college football, pro and college basketball, and more. And any gallery item may be printed in a variety of sizes on wood, metal, canvas, acrylic, or poster paper. And in Row One shop, check out the thousands more of unique items with the retro and historical designs dating back to 1876, including t-shirts, long sleeve shirts, phone cases, mugs, blankets, pillows, towels, and even shower curtains. Go to sportshistorynetwork.com, ROW1, for access to the full Row One catalog and for gallery prints and gift items, plus get a 15% discount off all prints on the Row One Pictorium Gallery with coupon code SHN15. Follow the link on the show notes.